All right, welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and today I have an awesome guest with me today. Someone who many of you in the mortgage and probably some of the real estate business know, but also a good friend of mine and someone I've known for a very long time. And so I'm excited to interview Ken because if you watch this with any regularity, you saw that I reposted him interviewing me. So I get to turn the tables on Mr. Ken Perry. Ken, welcome to Market Shares. How are you today, sir?
I'm so good. This is exciting, man. I remember you saying, I think I want to start a podcast. And now here you are.
Yeah, I don't know how many episodes in we are, but we had our 100th episode towards the end of last year, or I think at the very beginning of this year. So I'll tell you this, if nothing else, when I say I'm going to do something, I do it, and then we're consistent with it. So if nothing else, we're that.
So awesome.
Yeah, so Ken, for those of you that don't know Ken Perry, Ken is the CEO of the Knowledge Coop. And I first, met Ken around, the area of getting our, continuing education and our training. I think that's when we first met. I assume that's when we first met, but it was so long ago. I don't know that I remember the exact particulars, but, we used to all do our CE classes in person, and Ken is an awesome, I always called Ken like he's the compliance trainer and the stand-up comedian, like all in one. So it's always was a fun thing to go to. But then, life gets busy. We do so much stuff online. Obviously, COVID pushed us more in this direction. So a lot of us have moved to taking online, CE classes and preparing for your loan officer exams. And I got to say, Ken, as much as I was disappointed the first year, I actually signed up for your live class in Bellevue, and then something happened with my travel. I couldn't make it. So they said, okay, well, you've already paid for it, but we'll give you the online class. And I'm like, that's just not going to be the same. But I remember, if you remember, I took a picture of it. I was watching it at home in my theater, and I took a picture and said, oh, you're up on my screne. I actually really enjoyed the way that you did CE. So we got a lot to talk about today, but I think I'm going to start by talking a little bit about CE and kind of how this all came about and how you went from being a mortgage professional working in wholesale to getting into the compliance side of things, if you don't mind. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah. So when I started the company, I was an account executive for a lender, calling on brokers. In fact, just the other day, because we're looking for a bigger space for our company, we're walking down the street and I pointed to this building. I said, hey, that's where a lot of people that went to jail worked. And I started talking about it. It was a company right down the street. 12 people ended up in prison. But I was their AE. And so I saw some of the stuff going on in there, and I can remember going, I can't continue to enable this type of behavior by being here lending for people that just don't know, or they do know and they're doing it wrong. And so what I wanted to do is create a company that would train people on, this is how you do loans correctly. Like, this is how you read a credit report, and this is how you talk to a borrower about a credit report. This is how you read an appraisal, because most loan officers weren't even reading their appraisals. And as a loan officer, that was like my goal. Like, I want to know what's in that appraisal the second it comes back, because there's certain things that I can do that would be triggered by me knowing something on that appraisal. So I just wanted people to do things and be experts in the business. And so I started a company that had nothing to do with compliance. I didn't know anything about compliance. I was an AE for option one and then homecomings. Like, I didn't get RESPA training or any of that. And so I didn't know that was a thing. And so when I started, it was just to help people be successful, be successful by being experts. And I got booked to do a seminar, and this woman that was booking me said, because I had never done a seminar, and she's like, do you speak? We need a speaker for this conference. And I'm like, of course I do. And she's like, great, what do you speak on? I'm like, well, what do you need? And she said, well, we're kind of looking for like a compliance topic. And I had watched the news like the day before. They had passed this thing called the do not call laws. And I'm like, well, the do not call laws passed. When's your conference? And she's like, it's in 2 months. And I'm like, I could research between, I can do that. And so I booked a gig to do a compliance seminar in 2003. I started the company April of 2003. And then my first seminar technically was September. And so I went and did this gig, and I researched everything. I'm a debater. So I was a debater in college, flew around the country debating. And so I know what I'm doing when it comes to reading laws and defending them or arguing against them. And so I gave this speech, and it was literally stand-up comedy for an hour and a half, and they learned. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I started looking into like, how else do they learn this stuff? And I found out that everything else isn't great. And if I could make people laugh, then the response would be amazing because they would learn and I would feel great. So I started just reading every law. Did my first identity theft seminar that year. I started reading about cybersecurity, started taking hacker courses, like just diving in because my brain needs that. Like I need a rush constantly. And my rush was going and reading laws that nobody had ever read. And then being able to be the guy that could be like, okay, here's what you need to know. Like these are the important facts.
So you kind of knew from the very first conference that you did that there was going to be a humor aspect to your delivery, right? And you like that's something that I'm assuming has always come natural to you. And then when you take something super boring like compliance can be, and you add it with some humor, that's like a winning formula.
Yeah, my earliest memory of what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, you remember when you started getting that question as a kid? My earliest memory, I said stand-up comedian. Like that was early. So I always wanted to do something that can make people laugh, and for a number of reasons, I just like making people feel good and making people smile and laugh. And so, yeah, I always knew that was going to be a factor. I just didn't know that I could bring compliance into that world. I didn't, if you asked me when I was a kid what I want to be when I grew up, I didn't say a stand-up comedian that focuses on compliance-related mortgage laws. That wasn't a thing. But yeah, as soon as I found I could do it, I was all in.
Yeah, so it sounds like though '03, I mean that was well before the safe license and all of these requirements on loan officers. So you were probably the only one super excited about the licensing requirements coming to the mortgage industry because now it meant they needed more official training. So it's kind of interesting that most people would assume that you got into doing compliance training because of the need for compliance training, but that's not really the case at all.
There was a need, there wasn't a requirement. And the requirements
Right.
passed after I started my company, these requirements, Oregon passed theirs, Washington had theirs going. Teaching in Washington was different than Oregon because Washington had a 9-hour requirement. So it was 6 or 9 hours. And then Oregon had a 20-hour every 2 years. So when those laws passed, it was just like, well, shoot, now people have to go to my seminar. So that was awesome. And so, yeah, that really, it just made my life way easier when these laws passed. And then when the SAFE Act passed, it's like I could go all over the country. And that's really when in 2010 is when I went, I can't, I'm one man, back then it was me and 2 other people in my company. And now we're 30, but back then it was like, I can't just fly around all the time because it just doesn't work. I can't reach everybody. And so I went online and started. So my first videos I started doing on YouTube were 2010. There might be an 09 one. And I started doing weekly updates for the mortgage industry because they were, it was in pain, right? The industry was hurting in 2010. Everything had already, the employment had gone off. All these companies had shut down. And so I just went in and said, okay, so get this. My first gig I ever booked was $250. That's what I got for speaking for an hour. A year later, I'm booking for $5,000 a speech for an hour and a half speech. When the market crashed, I went back down to $250. And it wasn't because that's the only thing I can get. It was because if somebody I feel like this industry, I feel like the industry needs me. Like I do feel like I play a role here. And if anybody needed me and couldn't afford me, I wasn't willing to live with the fact that I could have helped them, but they couldn't afford it. And so I dropped everything down to $250, wrote a speech called 5 Ways Out of the Funk about how to shore up your like figure out how many months you have left to survive without going homeless. So start there, then start with looking around you to find out what your database could look like, who are the people around you that could give you business. Like I basically just dove in and delivered that speech all over for just like nothing in order to help the industry bounce back.
Yeah, sounds like maybe we should be dusting that speech off, and we're going to talk about the state of the mortgage business today. But before we leave CE, it sounds to me then like you're kind of a little bit above, in front of every kind of trend that happens, because when COVID happened, everybody went to online training. And what I noticed with you is you started doing some really cool online training and making your instead of your live, stand-up comedian events, all-day events, you started putting out video content, which would allow people to get certified or get their CE classes that way. really before even that, before COVID, before that all happened, but you do it differently. I feel like a lot of people who were doing what you do for a living with the CE classes maybe tried to transition to be able to teach those classes over Zoom with a decent amount of kind of replicating what they did in the classroom. But yours really from the beginning was very different, all video based, 5-minute kind of sections. Maybe talk a little bit about the CE classes you did, how you kind of came up with that style, because I'll tell you, for someone who has to take CE every single year, I still maintain my license. It's sure an easier way to go through the process, but also you learn a lot, and it's enjoyable, versus feeling like, oh, I'm stuck listening to this or, reading these documents. And it's just not like that. You get a different flavor. So obviously that was intentional. So what kind of led to you developing the style of CE that you do for online people?
I never want to create a class that I wouldn't want to take. Like, that's my number one thing. I never want to do something that, like, I think it's insulting to us, even as a compliance officer, a licensing director, to assign a class that everybody's going to hate. And that's just what our industry has, right? If you talk to licensing people, they're like, I know they hate it, but they have to do it. That's just not the way you train people. Like, why would you insult people by giving them something that they hate? So my big thing is I want to make heroes out of licensing and compliance people. I want them to assign content and have people email and be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Thank you. And so really that's what we strive for. So we have a filter everything runs through. It's 2 prongs. Is it entertaining? And is it massively educational, like deep research learning? If it's not one of those 2 things, it doesn't go out. So it has to, at least it typically is both of those things before it goes out. Occasionally there's something that just has to go out. We can't make it entertaining. It's just a delivery thing. But typically everything we do is entertaining. We did Sons of Compliance, 2 seasons of Sons of Compliance, 10 years ago. We did Game of Loans, where we redid the entire Game of Thrones, but we did it in full costume. I mean, that's one of our highest produced content pieces we've ever done. 30-minute movie of a guy leaving one kingdom to go to another. And of course, we paralleled that with loan officers leaving their job and taking borrower data with them. And then we filmed 2 years of kind of a Tonight Show. In fact, this year starts with me singing I'm Just Ken, about how nobody listens to the compliance guy, but I'm just Ken. It's so good. But it goes back to, what would I want to look at? Like, I like Saturday Night Live. And so whatever we can do to make things like Saturday Night Live, it will help our people learn, because they'll focus in on it and watch. But the best part is just below the videos on our CE, you start seeing this interaction. You start seeing this communication of people, because every video you can comment below, because we want that community built in. And going back to what you said about being ahead of the pack, we're always ahead of the pack. I'm always thinking, like, what's that next level? Because I compete with last year us. So I don't compete with anybody else out there. I compete with who we were last year, and we just try to get better every single year. And because of that, we're looking at, okay, the Knowledge Coop was built as an intranet for people to communicate internally and train their people internally. So when COVID happened, we were already ahead of the game. We had that. And it was just like, oh gosh, we have something that we not accidentally, but we built this with this in mind. But like, think about when we launched the Coop, nobody wanted to go on video, right? Nobody would do video. I don't want anybody to see me. And then all of a sudden COVID happens and everybody had to go on video. And so, the Coop was launched when nobody wanted to do video. But now that we've gone through COVID, in Coops, now we see people lighting up videos all the time, shooting videos for each other and assigning videos to their teams. And it's like, we built something just knowing that probably this is the way it would go. We're just early to it sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what a visionary should do, right? I mean, as the CEO of the company, you have to be looking forward. And I think that you've set things up in a way to be able to stay in your most creative spot, to be in the place in your organization that allows you to be that forward thinker. And I have to ask you about this, because I noticed your handle on social media is ADHD CEO. And you kind of referenced it earlier with, always needing to be stimulated. I would love to hear, why you chose that. But it seems to me, Ken, and I know you personally, and we're friends, and we've been in some coaching events together. And so we've got to know each other pretty well. So I happen to know probably a little bit more than most about how your company is set up, but you really have set up an organization to where, hey, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and having ADHD, I don't know what that means to you. I'll let you explain that. But you've been able to set up your organization in a way that whatever maybe you felt were the drawbacks of having that, you've been able to put things in place to shore that up, but then take the power that comes with, the good side of that and really leverage that. So maybe speak to that for a minute. And how'd you come up with that handle, and what does it mean to you?
It's funny. So I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until it was like 10 years ago. And when it happened, it was a real awakening for me, because there's a lot of people that are like, oh, my ADD did this, or like, oh, just the ADD, whatever. Like, they've never been diagnosed, but they like kind of throw things around. Like, when you do something stupid, that's your ADHD. And so I always kind of knew, I knew that was probably me, but I'd never been diagnosed. When I got diagnosed, it gave me a lot of power to be able to at least understand that there's something going on with my brain, which is, by the way, it is one of the most highly documented, highly proven things in the world. And so when you hear people go, oh, everybody's ADHD, it's actually not true. There's brain studies that we've been part of over at OHSU. Like, this is a serious brain difference that we have, right? So as soon as I found out what I wanted to do, and really I had to get comfortable with my own ability to talk about it, just because in the beginning, it's like, all you focus on is the weakness. ADHD kids have, we have something, in some cases, we have something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And that is because of the tens of thousands of people telling us, or comments made to us about how we're doing something wrong, or we're too hyper, or we talk too much, or we're too loud, or stop fidgeting, or stop, daydreaming, or whatever. So we get all these comments, which makes us very sensitive to people saying negative things to us. And so I wasn't ready to go out and talk about the positives, because at first I just focused on those negatives that I needed to get in line, right? So I needed to figure out, okay, how do we fix these things? Or not fix them, but how do I at least cover over some of those weaknesses that I have, right? So as soon as I was ready to talk about it, what I wanted to do is really normalize it for people. I'm a CEO. I've run my company for 21 years. I feel like I'm pretty successful. I don't always feel that way, but feel like I've got some success behind me. And so for anybody on the way up that's like ADHD is affecting them, I want them to look at me and go, oh, but like, it could actually be a good thing. And if you look at, Richard Branson has ADHD, Tony Robbins has ADHD. You start listing the CEOs with ADHD, like, it is a superpower. If you can get, into a position where you can hire for your weaknesses, then it can be amazing. But it takes a lot. Like, you've got to climb, and a lot of people stop climbing because they start and stop things too frequently, or they don't find something they're passionate about, and that's where things get a little bit negative for some people. But as soon as you can grow your business to where you can hire somebody else to offset those things that you aren't great at, then you can really focus in that genius zone of the ideas are everywhere. Like, I pull ideas, my brain is not caged. And so I can pull ideas out of everywhere. We just launched AI. Like, we're the first mortgage training company to launch artificial intelligence, so people can search Fannie, Freddie, VA, and FHA guidelines. And a lot of that is just like, going, okay, this is new. Like, I love new things, do a toy, like shiny object. And so my brain isn't hinged to, no, we must do things the way we've always done them. My brain gets bored at doing that. My brain goes, okay, what else? What are we not doing that we could do better? And then the trick is knowing which of these ideas should be, nourished and like fed, and which ideas are like, Ken, that's friggin' that's insane. Like, I have a lot of ideas that just need to go away, but they're super fun. Yeah, so that the ADHD has helped me a lot. But I have the advantage of having a lot of people who can offset those things, because I don't put things on my plate I can't handle. And I know what I can't handle because I know what my limitations are. And I have amazing people that my wife, is the beginning of that they can cover over a multitude of problems with a person with ADHD.
Yeah. Well, I have to imagine, Ken, that it's probably helped some people, just because I've heard you speak about this. I love when you will do like a video, like a live video from your car or a hotel room where you're really vulnerable and you just talk about something really serious. I've heard you talk about this subject before. So do more of those videos, like from, when you like cry a little bit if you could, but no, no, but I do love your just real vulnerable videos. It's really special. But I have to imagine that making this. I love that you just made your social media handle to just put it on the forefront and really bring it to people's attention, because I know that it helps people who deal with the same sorts of challenges, that it can be a superpower. So I commend you. I commend you for that. You mentioned, I got a few other things on my list here, but you mentioned AI. So let's just go there. I've been really enjoying using some of the AI tools out there, ChatGPT, and using it for helping to write scripts and just, I'm still figuring out the ways in which I can use it. So why don't you, I heard you mention this before on your social media as well, that you guys had launched this. Give us a deeper understanding of what this is. How would a mortgage company or a mortgage professional use this tool, and how accurate is it? Like, how are you finding this is working out for people?
Yeah, good question. So we launched the Knowledge Coop app last year, which is Knowledge Coop Plus. And that app, you can download it in the App Store or the Google Play Store. But when you download it, you get access to a lot of our content. So we're creating content constantly, and anybody can have access to a bunch of our content. Once you become a member of the Knowledge Coop, you get access to AI. And so it's a button on your phone. You press the button and you can ask it any question, Fannie, Freddie, FHA, or VA right now, and get the right answer. And then we source it for you. So we say, yeah, here's the answer. And this is the actual guideline area where we got that, section 5.3, paragraph 3, and then you can go find it for yourself and then make the argument with your underwriter, who seems to be saying that we've always done it this way. And you could be like, that's interesting because FHA says no. And so the way we did it is we put it, picture, taking this AI, assistant, putting it in a room and not feeding it anything. Now it doesn't know anything, right? And then we just feed it, where we basically reformat everything in guidelines to feed it the information we wanted to understand. And we don't feed it anything else, right? Because you can ask ChatGPT right now an FHA question, and it's going to give you an answer based on everything in the internet. And right. So what we did is we just drilled it down to just the things that really exist inside the guidelines. So if you have a question, it's unable to see outside of that question. In fact, we put one in an FHA box and only fed it FHA content. And now if you have a question, you just ask it and it only knows FHA, and that AI can't even see over the door to see the VA AI, which knows all the VA guidelines. And so you basically have a conversation with it. Like, I'm thinking about doing this kind of loan. What do I need to know? Are there any forms that I need for that? Is there a guideline that would help me address this? We had one, it was a manufactured home that hadn't been detitled, and they were trying to use the taxes of, they didn't have any good tax comps. And so what do you do with that? You just ask it your question, and then it just gives you the answer. And so everybody knows guidelines are very difficult to work your way through, especially FHA guidelines. You have to go through all regs online, and it's not the easiest process for getting it, your question answered. You got to go find the thing. But now you just ask. So like, I'm literally, ever since I started using it, I don't do loans, right? I haven't done a loan in 22 years, 24 years. So since I actually was an originator on a loan. So I don't know anything about guidelines on loans. I don't know much, but ever since then, like, I was at a party and somebody's like, I'm thinking about doing this. I'm like, let's see if you can. Like, I'm geeking out on this thing because I can just ask it a question and give people answers. So I feel like I'm now an expert just because the tool is an expert. So we launched it. It's freaking amazing. It's, it for the most part is right. If there's a question that's wrong, we can dive in and reteach it. And so because we control it, we can teach it what we want it to know. I won't get into how much controversy there is now around the people that are teaching OpenAI and Gemini, but I'll tell you that there is control. We can make it think things from our end as an administrator of this AI. We keep it clean.
Right. So what kind of feedback are you getting? I have to imagine loan officers would love this, because one of my favorite things to do when I originated was argue with my underwriters. I didn't officially do debate like you did in college, but if I went to college, I would have probably been on the debate team. I love debate. I love, understanding, what all my argument is and then going and making my case. I mean, it was one of the things that I learned early on in the business. And you're right. I mean, I'm going through guides and I'm doing it myself. So if nothing else, this is a huge shortcut, I would think, just to get to the right paragraph, because there are some things in context that you need to understand when you're reviewing guidelines as well. But just, I mean, if you're referencing where the information is and you can read the page before, the page after, and really go, okay, I see what this is all, how it all fits in. I mean, this has to be huge. Are you getting great feedback from loan officers on this?
Yeah, within an hour of launching, we had saved a deal already. Our first comment back after launch was, "You guys just saved a deal. I had an argument with my underwriter. I just won because of this." So yeah, it's pretty. We showed it to Rosemary David, and it was so funny. We were in Vegas, and we were showing her the app, and she's like jaw dropped, leaned back. She's like, "Oh my gosh!" Like it'll floor you when you get in there and see how easy it is. But so that's we just keep getting feedback on this is absolutely mind blowing. So it's fun, and it's fun because first of all, I read every guideline when I was a loan officer, so I believe in reading guidelines. I think there is some context to know. This doesn't replace you going in and reading to be smart and an expert on the business, because you don't want to have every single question you get asked. You're like, let me just see. Like you don't want, right? You want to be able to answer a lot of questions, but there are some intricate things that you need maybe it to look up and analyze for you. So yeah, it's mind blowing, and I'm just so proud of our team. We have 6 developers that worked on it, and these guys have been with me since 2012, and I mean, there's nothing they can't do, and they put in hours and hours and hours to build this.
Yeah, I think that it's important for loan officers to generally understand credit and capacity and ability to repay and these things. But there are a lot of very technical guidelines that can hang up the insurability, deliverability of a loan. And that's really what your underwriter typically gets hung up on because they don't want buybacks. They don't want loans that are uninsurable. Those are the things they get kind of reprimanded for. I think most underwriters want to approve loans. We want to help people get into homes. And so I always saw, reading the guidelines and getting down to that. Yeah, but it says or there's a comma here. So that doesn't, but so there are a lot of technical things, I think, when it gets down to the nitty gritty. But look, as a loan officer, you should understand the main factors that are like, is this person a good borrower who's going to be able to make their payments? Are we helping them out by putting them in this home? And if the answer to all those are yes, then let's get into the nitty gritty and just make sure that we can overcome an underwriter's concern with, are we meeting the guideline as stated? Is this loan going to be insurable? So on and so forth. Because those are the things that cost companies money, can cost underwriters their jobs, frankly, if they make too many mistakes. And so I think being able to give them this data, most underwriters, they might not like the fact that they can feel it's moving in the direction where maybe there's less human interaction needed, at least to get to the point of a decision. But I think most underwriters, generally speaking, would feel good about a loan officer doing the additional research and helping them justify a decision to approve a loan, right?
Yeah, and we rolled it out with 100 hours of fresh training content on who is Fannie Mae, who is Freddie Mac, what's FHA, what's USDA, what's VA. Like, we've rolled out 100 hours of training content in the last 3 years so people can become experts at this business. And so, yeah, pair it, right? Yes, get your training, but also get that shortcut of AI. And then remember, like with underwriters, you still need that verification of, okay, yeah, it said that. Let's go in and dive in and make sure that this is, the real thing. So you're going to need that human verification. But imagine how many loans you can underwrite as an underwriter with a tool like that. Your capacity for doing deals. I mean, let's say you're underwriting. How many loans does an underwriter underwrite in a week?
Well, they do about 40 a month, I think, is the right answer.
They could do 80 with a shortcut. It's job security, where people keep talking about losing their jobs. Like, no, if you're an underwriter, like, that is going to help you bang out a ton more underwrites, making you even more valuable to the company. So leveraging AI, my favorite phrase is, you're not going to get replaced by AI, but you will be replaced by somebody who leverages it. So if you learn to leverage AI and go, I can be so much more productive now than I ever was, and I'm not dealing with these, little things, then, I mean, awesome, right? And if a loan officer does the AI first, then you're not getting bad submissions. So you don't have to worry about wasting your time on something that some loan officer could have just asked one question to Coop AI, gotten the right answer, and been done.
Well, yeah, and it may have been a huge no. Like, absolutely, you can't do that. It's in black and white, and the loan officer wouldn't even have submitted the loan in the first place or told the borrower they thought they could make it work, so save a lot of time that way. All right, so just staying on AI for a quick second, what do you see? Lots of talk about AI. I love the way that you guys are using it. Do you see anything else in the near term where you see AI having a big impact on the mortgage business?
Oh yeah, it's going to be amazing. Like, this is like the internet coming out. It's literally bigger than the internet first coming out. It will change everything. And so, yeah, I think one thing we have to watch out for is just like when the internet came out, a lot of bad stuff can be done if you use it wrong. And so, it's going to be the wild, wild west for a little while. What you want to do is just double check everything, right? You're not going to just send something to somebody or use an AI and put any private information in there. Like there's a lot to it, but I think there's going to be some great companies giving us access. I listened to a podcast where a guy got AI to teach him how to speak Spanish through a conversation with AI. Just, hey, here's how I learned. Can you help me create a system? And it basically replaced Duolingo for the guy. So
Wow.
it can do a lot of stuff. You're an iPhone latest user, right?
I am.
You have the action button?
I do.
Dude, I just put the action button. My buddy showed me this. We were in the car on the way to Bandon last week. And I asked a guy a question like, what was that movie with like the cowboy? I gave him like 3 details. He's like, hang on. And he just pressed that button, which is linked to OpenAI. And so, watch this. If I press the button, it opens up ChatGPT and just starts listening. So I can be like, what is the name of that loan officer that runs Market Shares podcast, works for New American Funding? And then it just talks to you.
Yeah, that's okay. You're gonna have to show me how to do that one. I have not even attached anything. I have not even attached anything to that shortcut button on my iPhone yet.
Do it with AI. You can ask it all kinds of questions. It's crazy.
I love it. So what scares me about AI? Just you think about like you mentioned when the internet first came out, like, getmyw2.com or something, right? Could be like a really bad website that maybe people would use to falsify income. But, I've seen ChatGPT write attorney's letters. It could write, letters from a CPA. I mean, things like that are more, you wouldn't think of them being forged documents, but you start thinking about the things that AI can generate, and all of a sudden things like that really need to come into question, right? I mean, I would think so.
Just one big thing everybody needs to do right now is call your parents. So if your parents are over 70 years old, have a conversation with them about this. We just did a cybersecurity training that we just released, or we're releasing it next week, specifically around AI and cyber, what you have to watch out for now. And one of the things people are doing is I can go onto this app and I can upload 30 seconds of this podcast and make Tony Blodgett's voice say whatever I want. And so now what we're seeing is, that hack or the scam where people call somebody's mom and they say, hey, it's your son. I'm in a jail. I need bail money. Just Venmo it or wire it or whatever. So now they can do it with your voice. So you could be like, hey, it's Tony, grandma. I need, I'm stuck in prison, whatever. I just need you to Venmo this money to this place or wire this money to this place. And you could just leave a voicemail that's your voice. And it's you. And so what I'm telling everybody is call everybody that you know and let them know this exists, because they just had a scam where it's like $25 million was transferred from a bank. They used Zoom. And they used an app that would recreate everybody. It's a deep fake app that will help you just be somebody on Zoom. And it did it from a bank like VP calling a guy saying, I need you to wire this money. And he wired like $25 million to a bad account using a deep fake Zoom. So I know this is you because we chatted before and I know you.
Yeah.
We have shared memories. And so if you reference shared memories in a conversation, they can't deep fake that, right? So we just need to be careful when we're having calls, when we're listening to voicemails. Every voicemail you get may or may not be that person. Now, if it's tied to that phone number, it's more likely that it's that person. But these are the things that I worry about the most is people using it for bad reasons. And this just gave hackers like a massive upgrade.
Yeah. Well, I think it's hard to trust anything, when it comes to emails or phone calls or even messages on social media. I mean, so much of it is spam. I actually had a call from my bank this morning, which was actually legitimate. They had a question about a transaction on my account, but I didn't trust that it was them. And so he said, hey, we're from the bank and we need your email address to verify, that it's you. I said, no, I'm not comfortable giving you that. I said, would you be willing to send me a text message? Because my bank typically can send me a text message. And he said, well, because it's an outbound call, I'm not able to do that. I said, well, then I'm not comfortable giving you any of my information. And I said, can you tell me what type of transaction this is in regards to? And he goes, I'm sorry, I can't give you any other information. I need you to validate who you are first. And I'm like, that's okay. I'll call the bank. And so
You're
I
like,
hung up
you
with
called
him.
me, dude. I didn't call you.
Well, I absolutely let them know when I got, and I'll tell you, Ken, it was frustrating because it took me a long time to get back through to that department that could verify this transaction. And I was frustrated and I had meetings to go to and all this stuff. And I said to her, I said, you shouldn't be calling people outbound and asking me for information to verify my account without you being able to provide me with some information, or at least the ability to do the standard procedure you do whenever I call in, which is send me a text message to my phone. I have an app. You have my phone number. It's on my record. You're calling me. All of those things should be available. And I think that for me, it was a reminder that especially as a financial institution, like we need to start making this stuff more common practice so that it doesn't take someone like me to say, you know what, I don't trust this. So I'm going to call myself, because someone else who is more trusting might have fallen into a trap, given some bank information. Next thing you know, there's a major problem. And I think if we normalize it more, where people get used to, look, I want double authentication on every transaction I do with my bank. And if you're going to call me, there should be a way in which you can validate that. And, people don't think about this with the mortgage industry. And, when I was on your podcast, I know some of the stuff that's coming down the road as far as regulations that are being talked about, especially in different states and whatnot, around protecting people's identity and so on and so forth. But, we need to get better as organizations to proactively think about, if we're training people not to necessarily trust sources that they don't understand, then we need to get them used to and create simple ways in which people can verify their identity and make it part of our common communication practices.
Yeah, and to do that, we need to get back on our feet. This whole industry right now feels like an earthquake just happened. I don't know if you've been part of an earthquake before, but I was in the San Francisco one, and I'll never forget. I mean, the whole house shook. I was by myself at home, and I would turn around and the chandelier swinging behind me, and everything's crazy. A 7-point-something earthquake. And I ran outside and looked, and all my neighbors had run outside. Like, am I the only one who went through this? And we all just kind of stared at each other for a while. And I think that that's where the industry still kind of is. It feels like we're coming out of it a little, but we were so shaken up that nobody's thinking about the things that we should be thinking about. We're stunned. It's like a flashbang grenade went off, and we're just like, and so nobody's doing these forward thinking, hey, let's get back on track and make sure we've shored up our cyber, make sure that we've done that training on, anybody that's being assigned. AI is still talking to me. Cyber training that was like 4 years ago. It's ridiculous. Like, a lot has happened in the tech world in the last 4 years. So let's get back on reminding people what they need to know. Let's get back on, hey, it looks like we're all going to be in this business now. We survived the earthquake. Now let's go figure this out. And I think in a number of areas, it's back to work time.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of loan officers, are still in that, kind of state of like, what is happening? And thinking that something's going to, an outside force is going to somehow change their state of mind. You know what I mean? Something's going to change. Rates are going to drop by 100 basis points, or something's going to happen to snap us out of this. And maybe it will. I mean, if history has anything to say, usually it does. But I don't think that's a very great solution. I mean, we need to be ready to snap ourselves, like you said earlier, what you talked about in 2009. Like, we need to dust ourselves off, and we need to get going,
You said it best just now, dude. Like, we're waiting for something else to happen that will be an outside force will bring us back to life. And it really is from the inside. Like,
Yeah.
nobody's gonna put the paddles on and go clear, right? We have to wake ourselves up. I mean, this is it's go time. And I'm hoping that I'm seeing the beginning of it. Like, I've talked to a lot of loan officers lately that are full of applications where they've got people coming back into the market. Things start to feel a little bit better. So, I mean, hopefully that's where everybody goes, but it hasn't been that way. Like, it's been a few years of just shaking up.
I think the loan officers that are seeing that success have implemented new stuff in their business. You know, they're going to open houses. They're doing activity to create that, because I'm not seeing a huge shift in the market necessarily. But I am seeing loan officers starting to have success. And I think it's the ones that resuscitated themselves and got back after it. And they're starting to see results, because there is transactions out there, but they're not coming to you. You got to go to them and figure that out. And we do lots of podcasts about how to do that, so I'm not going to get into that today. But yeah, absolutely. Well, I got a few other things on my list here, Ken, that I want to make sure we touch on before we run out of time. One of them is it's election year. So there's lots of talk around an election year about what it means for rates and all these different things. When I think about it, and I think about Ken Perry, the question I have about the election year is, first of all, it seems to me like we felt a pretty significant change in the CFPB and kind of the regulatory approach, if you will, to our industry during the last election, because we went from a Republican president who they tend to be a little more less regulation, less I don't know. It just seems like they're less regulatory enforcement kind of mindset. And then we went to a Democrat in the White House, which tends to be more, I don't want to say, more about regulation, but really more about consumer protection, right? I mean, it's a lot more consumer protection focus, which tends to kind of come with regulation then to make sure consumers are being protected. So I think it's looked at sometimes as, oh, these guys are great, but I don't think that what happens when it shifts is necessarily, it feels like it's bad for business, but what it is it's protection for customers. So anyway, that aside, I felt a noticeable shift. Was that an accurate shift? And should we expect the same thing to shift back again if there were to be a change in the White House? I mean, what are your thoughts on this?
So, by the way, this discussion is a sensitive one. I think you did a good job. But you and I both remember when I did this seminar, and so it was right before, it was when it was Hillary versus Trump. And I was explaining what happens when, if Trump was to be elected, this is what would happen. If Hillary was to be elected, this is what would happen. Because you can pretty much predict, based on which president, you can predict your regulatory regime going forward, right? So when and a guy in that class stood up and started yelling at me, which I thought was amazing, but which had never happened before. I would love to get video.
I was in that class. Yeah, that was awesome. Or not. It wasn't awesome, actually. It was awkward is what it was. Yeah.
But the thing is, it is true, right? If you get, we knew that when Donald Trump became president, that we would see a CFPB that was not focused on just fighting, shoot first, ask questions later, right? The regulator was a very aggressive regulator. It was, everybody's probably doing something wrong. Let's just go get that money, right? And so when he was elected, we knew that we would not have that kind of a leader in the CFPB. And we did it. He looked to unwind the CFPB, which is the number one regulator for the mortgage industry. That's like the biggest. And so he looked to unwind it and make it as powerless as possible. Let's just not focus on enforcement, not focus on regulations that much, right? And so, but had Hillary been elected, you would have seen, probably Elizabeth Warren at the helm of the CFPB or somebody else like that. So you would get a much more aggressive. It's a giant pendulum, right?
Yeah.
It barely lands in the middle. And so the hard part would be, as a director of the CFPB, you have 4 years, maybe 8, maybe more than that if your party, can last longer. But most of the time, lately we've seen R then D, then R then D. So in this case, we have a Democratic president right now who has a Rohit Chopra, who is the director of the CFPB, who is not as aggressive as I thought he would be. But what I'm finding out now is they're making backroom deals with all the companies. So we're not seeing the enforcement announcements. We're seeing them settle these things. And part of the settlement is we won't say anything about it, but you're going to pay a fine. And so the fines are being paid outside of what we would normally see announced.
I don't love that.
I know. Well, you do if you got busted.
Well, no, I hear you, but it's like, to me, to a company that is large and successful and has money, I'm sure that they would rather, it's like hush money, just to not put them in the headlines. I would much rather, anyway, I don't know. I got to think about it. I didn't know that was happening, but I don't love it.
As a lover of compliance, I can tell you that I wish they had announced them because it would stop some of the bad actors from doing the bad things.
Well, and you would know what they're looking for, you would know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there have been a lot of enforcement actions. I imagine there's still a lot. Oh, I don't imagine. I know there's more coming this year. I just have word that we're going to see some cool stuff around LO comp. Cool, unless you're the one getting busted. But you're going to see more enforcement this year. And then in November, we'll have the election. And depending on who wins the election, we'll get either Rohit gets to stay in his position or Rohit's gone and there's going to be a different person in that spot. And that will change the future for the next 4 years for the mortgage industry. So either it gets, way less enforcement oriented, and then the industry can breathe for 4 years and maybe get some things done. There's a few things that would be awesome to get done. One would be on bond loans. It'd be cool to be able to pay somebody, a loan officer, less on a bond loan. If the company doesn't make any money, the loan officer should also participate in that because at least you still got a deal, right?
Yeah.
So stuff like that where there's things you can't do. It'd be nice to have a CFPB that was reasonable and they could sit down at the table and go, yeah, that's hurting lower income people. Let's change that. Like, that'd be awesome. But you get that pendulum. And so
maybe just a fresh look at LO compensation rules altogether. There's interesting things about the way those rules are written that were intended to do certain things, which aren't even relevant in our industry anymore. And I think actually hurt consumers in some ways, but I digress.
Well, I also think if Rohit does stay in power, I think there's a chance he gets reasonable. Like 8 years versus 4 is different. Like you've got 4 years to make a name for yourself and hope to get your job again. So I do think he'd settle down and start coming to the table with conversation again, because that dude's stressed, right? At the end of the year, he either has a job or doesn't. And ex-CFPB directors can't just go start from scratch or, greet at Walmart. I guess they could greet at Walmart, but you don't hear Cordray's name that much, right? So
right.
An attorney working for a firm that, having his history. But I do think that he would calm down a little bit and come back to the table potentially, depending on how he's dealt with by the industry.
So it is safe to say, though, unlike some things that there's a lot of talk like about interest rates, right? I mean, our friend Ryan Hills did a show about, everyone talks about, it's an election year and this is going to happen with rates or that's going to happen. And what they found out is not really much happens. You can't really even put your finger on it in an election year. But with this topic in particular, when it comes to compliance, if there's a change from D to R in the White House, we will see a change, a fairly significant change, it sounds like, in how it is the industry's regulated. Fair?
Yeah, and I think it'll be the most interesting potential result is if we get an I. If there's any way Kennedy gets elected, it will be fascinating to watch because I think he's the wild card. And if he's elected, he's very much, from what I know about him, he's not pro-government involvement. And so it would be interesting to see what he would do in that scenario.
It will be interesting just for everything if an I gets in the White House.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, it could be the first year ever.
It could be. Well, we have a few more months left, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, one other thing I want to touch on before we end is the big hot topic of March, it seems like, which is the NAR settlement, the NAR lawsuit. So much conversation about this, and everyone's got an opinion because there's the buyer's agent commission that's really at the heart of this whole discussion, but there's impacts to buyers. There's talk of, is Fannie and Freddie going to do something to allow lenders to start financing this into closing costs? Are they going to change the amount that they allow for closing cost credits from a seller so that it could be, wrapped into that, which you're shaking your head. No, I don't think any of that's going to happen with Fannie and Freddie. I don't see them making any changes. Matter of fact, our company just put out, because we had so many questions about this, we put out a news break just saying Fannie and Freddie have not changed their stance on what they're going to allow for seller concessions, in a transaction. So what are your thoughts on the NAR lawsuit? Anything that you've thought about or discussions that you've come up that you think is relevant to share?
Yeah. So on the Lessons from Last Time podcast next week, we'll release, we're going to shoot it tomorrow. And we're basically going to take lessons from what a mortgage company went through when we had massive change in regulations, and how did we get through that? Because I think realtors really need to focus on stopping their current train of thought and jumping trains. What I have said, and I think everybody needs to hear, this is what I've been saying for a few months now, is if you want to understand what just happened, you can't think like a realtor. Like what we learned in mortgage, and you remember when LO Comp changed. When LO Comp changed, loan officers were like, well, they'll find a way to make sure that we get paid. The answer is nobody gives a rip if you get paid. There is no LO Protection Act. There is no Realtor Protection Act. No consumer advocates care about how much compensation needs to go to the realtor, right? They don't care. And so to think that Fannie Mae is going to be like, wait, did you just say that realtors might not still be able to make 3%? Let's go fix that. Like, that's insane, right? Nobody's going to make that change that I know, right? Unless they can make a good argument that homeowners are being harmed, right? And so that's the first thing. If you're thinking through this, don't think like a realtor. You need to get out of it and go, what is the most likely result, right? If you look at, if if a realtor has to prove their worth, they better be ready to do that. You know, I never questioned when I bought a house. I never questioned my buyer's agent's income because I didn't have to pay it. I was paying it. I just didn't realize I was paying it because it was all being done outside of what I was staring at, right? But now before I go walk into house number 1, I have to sign a buyer's agent agreement saying, yeah, cool, if we don't get a deal where I'm going to get paid, where you're going to get paid by, let's say, 2%, hey, if we don't find that deal with 2%, then don't worry, I got you, bro. And signing a contract saying I'm going to pay somebody on $1 million house, I'm going to give them $20,000 for showing me a house. I just don't think buyers do that. Like, I think there's enough buyers that are smart. They go, cool, $20,000. What is it you do? Right? They do a lot. Right? But now they need to get used to explaining that to people. For 20 grand, this is what I do. Like, that's what I want.
Well, and I do all that, and I may not get paid because you might not buy a house.
Totally. Yeah. But here's the thing. That can't be an argument with me. You can't be like, look, I'm charging you 20 grand because I took Tony to 15 houses and he never bought. So you're going to pay Tony's fee because I just sucked it up with this deal with Tony, right? That's not a great argument for people either. So you've got to be able to say it in a way that is different. And when I look at the fact that I look at Zillow and Redfin every single day, literally every day, and you're going to love this. I look at Zillow, Redfin, and Freeman Auto. Freeman is a high-end car sale place nearby, and they update their inventory every day. I'm literally on those sites every day since I gave up gaming on my phone. That's my new gaming. And so I'm on there constantly. And so if I had a realtor go, Ken, you don't have to do that anymore. Like, tell me what you want. Like, what are you looking for? And since realtors are knocking down my door, and by the way, I want to move. And so nobody's really explaining why I need a buyer's agent. So I'm just doing it myself. And so by the time I find a house, I will have found that house. And what I need is for somebody to write that offer for me. And so if you want my crystal ball, I can tell you exactly what's going to happen. And I'm rarely wrong. I actually can confidently say that after 21 years of being right a lot of the time on a lot of these prediction type things. You can play this back for me later if I'm wrong. But here's what I'm thinking is going to happen. And this is a beautiful thing to end on. I believe that mortgage companies are stepping into the real estate space. I believe it because I'm already seeing it, but this is what I've been saying for over a year now. I think if I'm going to go buy a house and I have a confident, amazing loan officer who calls me and goes, dude, we just launched a real estate side. And I go, you did what? And they go, yeah, we just launched real estate side. Like, why would you pay 20 grand to that realtor to go find you that house? What we're going to do is we're going to go find that house for you. We've hired a couple of real estate agents who are rock stars. And for $3,000, we're going to do everything that you were getting for 3%, but like better. And I go, really, how are you going to do that? And they're like, well, what is it you want to do? And I'll be like, I like shopping for homes, but I need you to write the contract. They'd be like, well, that's going to cost this much. And all the mortgage company cares about on the real estate side is breaking even, because the mortgage company makes all their money on mortgages. It goes to like when I was speaking, I was getting $5,000 a pop. Barry Habib was speaking. He didn't care how much money he got because he got subscriptions in the back of the room, right? Join Mortgage Marketing Guide or whatever it was back then. And so he was making all his money in the back of the house. Same thing with mortgage. Mortgage people don't need to make money on real estate. And so if they go in and cover the real estate portion, it's risky and it's dangerous. I'm not saying it's easy, but if they do it with professionals working there, they have their processors do the order outs on all the inspections, bring all the inspections in, they have a contract writer. So if you did that, I'd probably just go to my mortgage company for the deal, which empowers loan officers like crazy. And so we're getting calls now for real estate agents wanting to get mortgage licenses. Our pre-licensing class, by the way, is going to go bonkers this year because a lot of real estate agents are like, okay, I don't want the business taken from me. So how do I get in front of it, go be a multiple, area player and be able to have that shore up anything just in case something happens where I'm not going to be able to make money anymore. So that's where I think things are going. And I don't think I'm wrong.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you probably saw, I think it was Housing Wire article where the president of the NBA said that this opens up huge opportunity for dual licensing. And yeah, I'll send you the article if you haven't seen it yet. So yeah, I think there's a lot of talk about how the real estate agent, loan officer, how that merges together, whether it's, realtors becoming loan officers so they can do what you just said, or loan officers becoming realtors. I mean, I think it was in December of 2022, HUD changed their regulation with a mortgagee letter saying that they allow for dual licensing. So there's really nothing precluding dual licensing in any way. So
The only
look,
risk of lawsuit, which you have anyway.
right? Absolutely. So well, let's do end on that. I'm interested to see where it goes. I think that you very well could be right. I do know that the mortgage and real estate has to figure out a way to work together because it's a lot of dollars going to that buyer's agent, and the loan officers rely on buyers to get into houses. I mean, there's a vested interest in mortgage companies and or loan officers, to figure that piece of it out. Because think about this. I mean, if you're a loan officer and all your business comes from buyer's agents and they go away, what's your business look like? There's full on, or if they go in-house, well, for the mortgage company, maybe not so much for the loan officer.
Depending on how the partnerships work.
Depending on how it all works. That's right. Well, and that's why there's probably going to be more than one version of how it works, but it's all going to fit in to that realm somehow or another. And maybe in a couple months, Ken, as we start seeing how this unpacks, I could sit here and talk to you all day. Maybe we do another episode because I'd love to maybe, talk about some of the things going on out there. If we get close and, this election stuff, I think you'll have a lot to add. So I'd love to have you as a future guest again. You're a good friend of mine, but just such tuned in with what's going on in the mortgage industry. So I will welcome you back anytime on Market Shares. I appreciate you dedicating this time to speak with us here today. And for those of you in the audience, look, this only grows if you share with people what we're doing here at Market Shares. So I would ask for your referral to friends in the industry who you think might enjoy this content. Obviously, like and subscribe if you want to see the next episode, which will be out next Friday at 10 a.m. Until next time, take care. Thank you, Mr. Perry. Have a good day.